For 3 minutes, the aliens had tried everything they had to kill the human. Then they spent the next 30 seconds running from him. The security footage showed the same impossible scene again and again. A 19-year-old human stood alone in the middle of the academy. No armor, no weapon, no soldiers beside him, just a young man standing perfectly still, while an entire corridor of aliens fled from him. One of the guards screamed through the emergency channel, "Do not let him touch the walls." The commander froze. "Why?" The guard looked at the destruction behind the human. A crushed security door, broken support beams, deep footprints carved into the floor. Then he whispered, "I don't know." The commander stared at the screen. "What do you mean you don't know?" The guard swallowed. "That's what scares me. Because every report they had received from Earth said the same thing. Humans were weak, fragile, slow. Their bodies had evolved under a world with far too much gravity. Compared to the Aurelians, humans weren't supposed to stand a chance. That was why the aliens had laughed when this human first arrived. They didn't see a soldier. They didn't see a threat. They didn't even see a warrior. They saw a 19-year-old student. They thought Earth had sent them a joke. They were wrong. Terribly wrong. Because 3 days earlier, those same aliens hadn't been running from him. They had been laughing at him. And the human? He had no idea why they were afraid. Not yet. The elevator doors opened. Arthur stepped out. He felt light. Not lighter. Wrong. His first step nearly carried him across the corridor. He caught himself against the nearest support. The metal bent beneath his hand. Arthur froze. He slowly looked at his fingers. Then at the damaged support. Oh. A few nearby students turned. Someone laughed. Arthur released the metal. "Sorry." The laughter grew louder. Arthur looked around. The academy stretched across a vast silver hall, filled with enormous windows and strange floating walkways. Aurelians moved through the low gravity as if they had been born for it. They were tall, pale blue, and impossibly graceful. Arthur felt like someone had suddenly removed the weight from his entire body. He took another step. Too fast. He caught himself again. More laughter. Arthur sighed. "This planet hates me." That made the aliens laugh even harder. Arthur didn't understand why. Then a tall Aurelian woman stepped through the crowd. She was nearly 9 feet tall with long limbs and black eyes that seemed almost too still. Unlike the others, she wasn't laughing. Her eyes moved from Arthur to the bent support, then back to Arthur. "Your name?" Arthur straightened. "Arthur." She studied him. "Arthur what?" "Arthur Vale." Something changed in her expression. Not fear, not yet, concern. She turned toward the academy staff. "Take him to medical." Arthur blinked. "Medical?" "Yes. I'm fine." "I didn't ask." Arthur stared at her, then followed. The medical chamber was almost empty. A technician approached with a scanning device. Arthur sat down. The device passed over his arm. It beeped. The technician frowned. He scanned again. Another beep. He looked at the screen. "Doctor?" Dr. Selene turned. "What?" "The density reading." "What about it?" "It's wrong." "How wrong?" The technician stared at the screen. "Earth normal." Silence. Dr. Selene looked at Arthur. Then at the screen. "Run it again." The technician did. Same result. Arthur looked between them. "Is that bad?" Neither answered. He frowned. "Why is everyone looking at me like that?" Dr. Selene hesitated. "Because we just found something we don't understand." Arthur nodded slowly. "That's been happening all morning." For the first time, Dr. Selene almost smiled. Almost. But then the scanner beeped again. The technician's face changed. "Doctor?" She looked at him. "What now?" He pointed at the display. "The scanner isn't reading him correctly." Arthur leaned forward. "What does that mean?" The technician swallowed. "It means the number shouldn't be possible." Arthur looked at Dr. Selene. She didn't answer. She was staring at the screen. Then quietly, "How strong is Earth's gravity?" Arthur shrugged. "Normal?" The technician slowly lowered the scanner. Dr. Selene stared at Arthur. Neither of them laughed anymore. They were tall, graceful, and perfectly adapted to Aurelia's gentle gravity. Humans had evolved under a heavier world, a world that demanded more from every step, more from every movement. more from every muscle. Arthur had spent his entire life under that weight. Here he barely noticed it. Dr. Selene finally looked away from the scanner. Take him to the training hall. Arthur frowned. Why? To see what your body does here. Arthur sighed. Great. Later that morning, Arthur stepped onto the academy's training floor. A dozen students watched from the edges. Arthur rolled his shoulders. Okay. He took one step, then another. His balance disappeared. He jumped, far higher than he expected. Oh no. Arthur slammed into the ceiling. A crater appeared above him. He dropped back toward the floor. He landed hard. He groaned. I hate this planet. Nobody laughed. The aliens were staring at the crater above him. Arthur slowly looked up, then at the students. What? No one answered. He stood, took one careful step. The floor beneath his boot split. Arthur froze. He slowly lifted his foot. A jagged crack remained beneath it. Dr. Selene stared at the damaged floor, then at Arthur. No, she said quietly. Arthur looked at her. What? She took one step closer. You found ours? Arthur frowned. I don't know what that means. She didn't answer, because she was no longer looking at the broken floor. She was looking at him. And somewhere far above Aurelia, something else had noticed him too. 3 seconds later, an unknown signal appeared in orbital space. Unknown vessel, orbital space. Target identified human. Biological classification, Earth Deathworld species. The message repeated. Then another line appeared. Target confirmed. Arthur knew none of this. He was still standing inside the academy, wondering why everyone had suddenly stopped laughing. But Dr. Selene understood one thing. Someone had been watching, and for the first time, she wondered if Earth had sent them a joke, or if something out there already knew what happens when a human stops holding back. That night, Arthur couldn't sleep. Not because he was afraid, because every time he closed his eyes, he felt the same strange sensation. Wait, as if his body remembered something his mind had forgotten. He sat on the edge of the small guest room, staring through the window at Aurelia's pale blue sky. 3 days ago, everyone had laughed at him. Now they wouldn't even stand near him. Arthur rubbed his eyes. I really need to go home. A sound came from the hallway. Not footsteps. An alarm. Then another. And another. Arthur stood. The entire academy suddenly went dark. Emergency lights flickered on. Red. Then the windows shook. Something had hit the outer wall. Arthur ran into the corridor. Students were already fleeing. Guards were shouting. Get underground. Seal the academy. Move! Arthur grabbed the nearest guard. What's happening? The guard looked at him. For half a second, he said nothing. Then his face changed. Fear. Stay away from the windows. Another explosion rocked the academy. Arthur looked toward the glass. 3 enormous shapes had appeared above the academy. Black, silent, descending. Dr. Selene appeared at the end of the corridor. Arthur? He turned. What are those? She reached him and grabbed his shoulder. Come with me. Selene, what is happening? They've been searching for Earth. Arthur stopped. That doesn't explain why they're here. Selene looked toward the ships. They found what they were looking for. Arthur frowned. What? She looked directly at him. You? Another explosion shook the academy. Selene pulled him toward the nearest terminal. Her fingers moved across the controls. A hidden medical file appeared. Arthur Vale. Species human. Origin Earth. Then another line appeared. Physical condition normal. Arthur almost laughed. Finally, something normal. Selene didn't smile. She opened another scan. His body density. His bone structure. His muscle mass. Everything the academy had measured since he arrived. Arthur looked at the numbers. So what's wrong with them? Selene stared at the screen. The scanner isn't reading you correctly. Arthur frowned. What does that mean? It means the number shouldn't be possible. Another impact shook the building. Arthur looked toward the ceiling. How strong is Earth's gravity? Selene turned toward him. Arthur shrugged. Normal? She stared at him for a moment. Then quietly. Normal for you. A violent impact shook the academy. The ceiling cracked. Dust fell around them. Selene grabbed his arm. Stay here. Arthur pulled free. People are trapped downstairs. Arthur! I can help. You don't know what you can do. Arthur looked at her. I've been hearing that all day. Then he ran. Celine followed. They reached the lower training hall. Half the ceiling had collapsed. 3 students were trapped beneath a fallen support beam. Several guards were trying to lift it. It didn't move. Arthur stepped forward. One guard blocked him. Stay back. Arthur looked at the trapped students. Then at the beam. How heavy? The guard shook his head. Too heavy. Arthur placed both hands beneath it. Celine's eyes widened. Arthur, wait. He lifted. The beam came off the ground. Not slowly. Instantly. The guards froze. Arthur looked surprised. That's it? The trapped students crawled free. Arthur dropped the beam. Silence. Nobody laughed. Arthur looked around. Why is everyone staring at me? Celine didn't answer. She was staring at the floor. A new crack had appeared beneath Arthur's feet. Not from the beam. From him. Then, the academy doors exploded inward. Something stepped through the smoke. It was taller than any Aurelian guard. Its body was covered in dark armor. Its face was hidden behind a smooth black helmet. A red light appeared across the visor. For several seconds, neither side moved. Then the creature spoke. Confirmed. Its voice was cold. Earthborn. The creature paused. Its weapon lowered slightly. The reports were wrong. Arthur frowned. What reports? The creature looked directly at him. They said you would be harmless. Arthur's expression changed. How do you know anything about me? The creature raised its weapon. Celine shouted, Arthur, move! The weapon fired. Arthur barely had time to react. The blast hit him in the chest. He flew backward through a metal railing. Everyone screamed. Celine ran toward him. Arthur! Dust filled the hall. Nothing moved. Then, a hand appeared through the smoke. Arthur pulled himself upright. His clothes were torn. A thin line of blood ran down his arm, but he was still standing. The creature lowered its weapon. For the first time, it looked afraid. Arthur looked down at the blood, then at the creature. Okay. He wiped the blood from his arm. That hurt. The creature took one step backward. Arthur noticed. You're scared of me. The creature said nothing. Then every screen in the academy suddenly turned black. One final message appeared. Do not let him remember. Arthur stared at it. Remember what? No one answered. Above them, the 3 unknown ships began descending toward the academy. Dr. Celine looked at Arthur. The bleeding had already begun to slow. His eyes remained fixed on the message. Do not let him remember, Arthur whispered. What did they do to me? Celine said nothing, because she feared she already knew the answer. Earth hadn't forgotten Arthur Vale. Arthur Vale had forgotten Earth. Arthur couldn't stop thinking about the message. Do not let him remember. He didn't know what it meant. Dr. Celine did. Or at least, she thought she did. Before she could explain, the academy shook again. Dust fell from the ceiling. Emergency lights flashed across the corridor. Arthur looked toward the windows. 3 ships hung above the academy. Closer now. Watching. How many of them are there? Arthur asked. Celine didn't answer. She was staring at the screen in his hand. At the message. At the words that had appeared after the attackers arrived. Earth was the warning. Arthur looked at her. What does that mean? Celine finally met his eyes. I don't know. You're the scientist. I know. Then find out. Another tremor shook the building. Arthur grabbed the wall to steady himself. The wall split beneath his hand. He immediately pulled away. Sorry. Celine stared at the damage. You keep doing that. I'm trying not to. That may be the problem. Arthur frowned. What does that mean? Celine stepped closer. You keep thinking about your strength as something you have to control. She glanced at the damaged wall. But you still don't understand where it comes from. Arthur was about to answer when every light in the academy went dark. Silence. Then, something moved behind them. Arthur turned. A figure stepped through the smoke. Tall, armored, its face hidden behind a black mask. A weapon pointed directly at Arthur. Celine whispered, Don't move. Arthur looked at the weapon. Wasn't planning to. The creature spoke. Confirmed. Its voice was cold. Earthborn. It paused. Then its weapon lowered slightly. The reports were wrong. Arthur frowned. What reports? The creature looked directly at him. They said you would be harmless. Arthur's expression changed. Who told you about humans? The creature didn't answer. Instead, it took one step closer. Something inside Arthur tightened. Not fear, a strange pressure, like a memory trying to force its way through a locked door. For a fraction of a second, he saw a red sky, a vast black structure, and a child standing beneath it. Then it vanished. Arthur grabbed his head. Wait. Celine caught his arm. What did you see? I don't know. The creature stepped back. Arthur looked at it. Why did you come here? Its mask tilted slightly. Because you are beginning to remember. Arthur stared at it. I don't remember anything. Not consciously. Silence. Arthur swallowed. What am I supposed to remember? The creature raised its weapon. Arthur stepped forward. If you came for me. He glanced at Celine. Leave her out of this. The creature watched him. Then, no. Arthur frowned. No what? You haven't remembered enough. A burst of white light filled the corridor. Arthur threw up his arms. When the light disappeared, the creature was gone. So was the smoke. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Arthur lowered his arms. What just happened? Celine stared at the empty corridor. I don't know. Arthur looked toward the windows. The 3 ships were already moving away. Arthur stared at them. Why would they leave? Celine's expression hardened. Because they got what they came for. Arthur looked at her. What? She pointed toward him. Proof. Arthur frowned. Proof of what? Celine didn't answer. Instead, she looked at the message again. Earth was the warning. Arthur pointed at the screen. That doesn't make sense. Celine looked at him. What? Our records say humanity met its first alien civilization less than a century ago. He looked at the message. So why do they remember us? Celine had no answer. Arthur looked down at his hands. The strange pressure returned. Another flash. A burning horizon. The same massive structure. And a sound. Not words. Not a voice. A warning. Run. Arthur suddenly looked upward. The memory disappeared. He was back in the academy. Back on Aurelia. But something had changed. For the first time since arriving, Arthur felt something he couldn't explain. Not fear. Recognition. His lips parted. I've seen that before. Celine turned sharply. What? Arthur touched his temple. His breathing changed. Then, for less than a second, he remembered. And somewhere deep inside his memory, something woke up. The academy lights flickered. Then every screen in the corridor turned black. Arthur looked around. What's happening? Nobody answered. A single message appeared across every screen. Accessing archived Earth records. Dr. Celine froze. No. Arthur looked at her. What? She stepped toward the nearest screen. That system has been sealed for over 100 years. The screen flickered. A second message appeared. Archive age 1847 years. Arthur stared at it. That's impossible. Celine didn't answer. Because the archive had already opened. And the first image appearing on the screen was Earth. But not the Earth Arthur knew. The sky was red. The oceans were darker. And stretching across the horizon stood a structure so enormous that the Academy's entire screen could barely contain it. Arthur stopped breathing. He had seen it before. Not in a photograph. Not in a dream. Somewhere else. Somewhere inside him. Another flash. A burning horizon. The same massive structure. And a sound. Not words. Not a voice. A warning. Run. Arthur stepped back. The image disappeared. The Academy lights returned. Everyone stared at him. Arthur swallowed. I know that place. Dr. Celine slowly turned toward the screen. You shouldn't. Arthur looked at her. Why? Because that record predates human civilization. Arthur stared at the date again. 1447 years. That can't be right. I know. Then change it. I can't. Why? Celine pointed toward the screen. Because the archive isn't using our current calendar. Arthur frowned. What does that mean? It means... She hesitated. This record is older than our records say humanity is. Arthur stared at the image. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then the screen changed. A new line appeared. Origin record. Classification human. Arthur's expression hardened. Why does it say human? Celine stepped closer. I don't know. Another line appeared. Origin location unknown. Arthur looked at her. Unknown? Celine shook her head. No. She looked disturbed. It shouldn't say unknown. Then what should it say? Celine didn't answer. The screen changed again. A map appeared. Thousands of stars filled the display. Then one by one they disappeared. Arthur watched in confusion. What am I looking at? Celine whispered. A record of worlds. Worlds that what? Stopped transmitting. Arthur looked at her. How many? Celine counted silently. Her face changed. Hundreds. The room became colder. Arthur pointed at the map. Who did this? We don't know. Then why keep the record? Because someone wanted us to remember. A final symbol appeared in the center of the screen. Arthur stared at it. His breathing changed. He knew that symbol too. He didn't know why, but he knew it. His hand slowly lifted toward the screen. Arthur. He stopped. Celine grabbed his wrist. Don't. Arthur looked at her. Why? I don't know what happens when you touch it. Arthur looked back at the symbol. You think it will hurt me? Celine shook her head. No. Then what? She looked at his face. I think it might show you something. Arthur lowered his hand. Something I forgot. Yes. A deep sound suddenly came from beneath the academy. The floor shook. Everyone froze. Another impact. Dust fell from the ceiling. Arthur looked toward the windows. The 3 ships were still there, above the academy, watching. They never left, Arthur said. Celine's expression hardened. No. Arthur looked at her. Then why haven't they attacked? She didn't answer. A third impact shook the building. This time the academy doors opened. Something stepped through the smoke. Tall, armored, its face hidden behind a dark helmet. Arthur immediately recognized the symbol on its chest. The same symbol from the archive. The creature looked directly at him. Arthur Vale. Arthur froze. Nobody in the room moved. The creature continued. You remember? Arthur shook his head. I don't. The creature tilted its head. Not consciously. Arthur stepped forward. What do you want? The creature didn't answer. Instead, it looked at the ancient image still frozen on the screen. Then back at Arthur. You should not have seen that. Arthur frowned. Why? The creature's voice became quieter. Because now they know. Who? The creature looked toward the ceiling. The ones who were never supposed to find you. Arthur glanced at Celine. What does that mean? Celine's face had gone pale. The creature raised its weapon. Arthur moved. The weapon fired. He stepped aside. The blast tore through the wall behind him. Before the creature could fire again, Arthur was already standing in front of it. He grabbed the weapon. The creature didn't resist. The weapon came free. Arthur stared at it. Then at the creature. Why did you let me take that? The creature said nothing. It was watching his face. Waiting. Testing him. Then it spoke. Confirmed. Arthur's expression tightened. Confirmed what? The creature looked directly into his eyes. He remembers. Arthur's stomach dropped. I told you I don't. Not enough. The creature stepped backward. Arthur tightened his grip on the weapon. What am I supposed to remember? The creature looked at the ancient earth image. Then said, Where you came from. Arthur went still. Celine looked at the creature. You don't know where humans came from. The creature turned toward her. We knew before your species knew. Arthur looked between them. What are you talking about? The creature's helmet turned toward him. Your people believe they discovered the stars. Arthur said nothing. They believe first contact happened less than a century ago. Celine stepped forward. Our records say humanity met its first alien civilization less than a century ago. She looked at the message on the screen. So why do they remember us? The creature didn't answer immediately. Then, because you were never new. Arthur's face tightened. What does that mean? The creature looked toward the ancient earth image. You returned. Silence. Arthur stared at the screen. Returned from where? The creature's voice became almost a whisper. That is what you forgot. Arthur couldn't move. Another tremor shook the academy. The creature suddenly turned toward the ceiling. Its posture changed. Arthur noticed. What? The creature looked at him. They found you. Celine looked toward the windows. Who? The creature answered. The ones who followed you. Outside, the sky changed. The 3 ships above the academy were no longer alone. More appeared beyond them. Then more. Then dozens. The stars themselves seemed to disappear behind them. Arthur stared upward. How many are there? Celine whispered. Too many. Arthur looked back at the ancient image. The same black structure. The same red sky. The same symbol. And suddenly one final message appeared across the screen. First contact was a return. Arthur stared at the words. He didn't understand them. Not yet. But somewhere inside his mind, he knew they were true. Then the screen changed one last time. A single name appeared. Arthur Vale. Underneath it. Do not let him remember the rest. Arthur stared at his own name. Arthur Vale. For a moment he couldn't breathe. Then something inside his mind unlocked. Not a memory. A door. And this time, it was opening. The door opened. Arthur expected darkness. Instead, he saw Earth. Not the Earth he knew. The sky was red. The oceans were darker, and beneath a black, impossible structure, thousands of figures stood in silence. Arthur took a step forward. I was there. Celine stared at him. Where? Arthur pointed toward the image. Earth. The scene changed. A child appeared beneath the structure. Small. Barefoot. Alone. Arthur stopped breathing. The child looked up, then slowly turned toward them. Arthur felt something twist inside his chest. That's me. Celine stepped closer to the screen. No. Arthur looked at her. What? She pointed toward the date. Arthur looked at it again. It meant nothing to him. But Celine understood it. Her face changed. How old was I? Arthur asked. She didn't answer. Arthur turned toward her. How old was I? Celine swallowed. 6. When? She looked at the date. 1847 years ago. Arthur stared at her. That's impossible. I know. I'm 19. I know. Arthur looked back at the child. The image flickered. For 1 second, the child was gone. In his place stood Arthur, older, wearing the same strange symbol he had seen in his memories. Then the screen went black. A single sentence appeared. You were not sent away. Arthur stared at it. Another line appeared. You were sent back. He whispered. Back from where? No answer. Then the academy shook. Hard. The walls trembled. Outside the windows, the sky filled with ships. Not 3. Hundreds. Some were moving toward the academy. Others were moving against them. Arthur watched as 2 groups of ships opened fire on each other. Celine looked up. They're fighting. Why? She watched one fleet move between the academy and the others. Protecting it. Protecting him. They're trying to keep you alive. Arthur looked at her. Who? Celine didn't answer. Then another ship entered the sky. It was enormous, far larger than anything around it. The other ships immediately stopped firing. Every weapon went silent. The enormous shape moved above the fleet. Arthur stared at it. He should have been terrified. Instead, something inside him recognized its shape. His lips moved before he understood why. You came back. Selena froze. Arthur. She looked at him. Who came back? Arthur didn't answer, because the voice had already spoken. Welcome home. Arthur stared at the screen. Do not let Arthur Vale remember the rest. His eyes moved slowly across the words. What was I carrying? The room stayed silent. Dr. Celine looked at him. Not a weapon. Arthur frowned. Then what? She hesitated. A memory. Arthur touched his temple. The pain returned. Not sharp this time. Deep. Ancient. And suddenly, he remembered. Not a fragment this time. Everything. He was 6 years old. The sky above him was red. Cities were burning in the distance. Thousands of human ships were rising into the darkness. Arthur stood beside a woman he somehow knew was his mother. She was crying. He didn't understand why. She knelt in front of him and placed both hands on his shoulders. Listen to me. Arthur looked up at her. Where are we going? She looked toward the sky. Home. Arthur frowned. But this is Earth. His mother's eyes filled with tears. Not anymore. Behind them, something enormous stood against the burning sky. The same structure Arthur had seen in every fragment. The door. It was opening. Arthur stared at it. What is that? His mother pulled him closer. Something we were never supposed to find. The memory shook. The sky went black, and then Arthur heard his older self. We have to close it. Another voice answered. If we close it, we lose everything. Arthur remembered the answer. We already lost everything. The memory changed again. He saw humanity leaving, not fleeing from an enemy fleet, leaving quietly, world after world, colony after colony, human ships disappearing into the darkness. Then he saw why. Something had been following them. Not an army, not a civilization, something older, something that had been waiting behind the door, something the galaxy had spent millions of years keeping asleep. Arthur gasped. Celine grabbed his shoulder. What did you see? Arthur looked at her. The door. And? His voice dropped. It wasn't protecting us. Selena froze. It was protecting everything else. The room went still. Arthur looked back at the screen. Suddenly the pieces connected. The vanished civilizations, the frightened aliens, the ancient messages, the ships that had hunted him, the ships that had protected him. They weren't fighting over Aurelia. They were fighting over what Arthur remembered. Because humanity had discovered something the galaxy had spent millions of years trying to forget. And when humanity understood the danger, it chose silence. It erased its own history. It disappeared. For 1847 years, Arthur looked at Celine. So why send me back? Celine didn't answer. Arthur waited. Why me? She finally spoke. Because you were carrying what humanity could not afford to lose. Arthur stared at her. What? The truth. And the memory of how to close the door. Arthur looked toward the enormous structure hanging above the fleet. Then the ancient signal changed. One line appeared. Are you still human? Arthur read it twice. Celine looked at him. Arthur. He understood the question now. Humanity had survived by becoming silent, by hiding, by refusing to touch the door again. But hiding had never destroyed the danger. It had only delayed it. Arthur stepped forward. Yes. His voice was quiet. Still? The alien ships slowly lowered their weapons. Across the academy, thousands of frightened eyes watched the human standing beneath the stars. The human standing before them wasn't a weapon humanity had built. He was the proof of what humanity had survived. For 1847 years, humanity had hidden from the galaxy. Now the galaxy knew why. Humanity was back. Then the ancient signal changed again. Welcome home, humanity. Arthur looked toward the stars. For one moment, nothing moved. Then another message appeared. The door is open. Arthur's expression changed. Dr. Selene stared at the screen. Arthur. He didn't answer. Because somewhere beyond the stars, something had awakened. Something humanity had once sacrificed everything to keep asleep. Arthur looked into the darkness. This time, humanity wasn't hiding from it. Humanity was coming for it.